My friends, hello there. Today I have exciting plans because whether it be making a video using a VTuber model or making a submod for TNO where really weird things happen, I do my best to keep Hearts of Iron 4 interesting, albeit cursed. And today my quest continues. Recently I organized a Hearts of Iron 4 game following a recommendation from Juicy, a bagel baron in the Shaky Bakery. This recommendation was to organize a game where we, the players, only played as minor nations and helped the extremely incompetent AI majors win. It would be set up as a regular historical Hearts of Iron 4 game, and all the players would have to go down their historical paths, and the majors would simply be set to historical AI focuses. I, Shaky, played as the Dominion of Canada, leader of the Allies in place of the UK. Kudo, one of my Discord mods, played Romania, leader of the Axis in place of Germany. And Juicy, who had tricked me into giving Bulgaria focuses to help them research heavy tanks, played as Bulgaria, of course. We also had several other players on every minor nation, from the Philippines to Mongolia. And then with everything set up, I let my boss know I needed the day off from work, and then this beautiful game finally began. And naturally, I had a plan, and not just any plan, but the plan. In addition to my innately superior Air Force, I would also try to outproduce AI Germany and Japan as they focused on making stupid interwar fighters and tanks and stuff that the AI can't even manage. The Canadian Air Force would dominate and tint the skies of Europe red, and the Axis miners would lose all hope as they watched their factories, their railroads, their everything get reduced to dust. Well, at least that was the plan initially. Also, we weren't allowed to put any divisions in France, so we couldn't do the obvious meme there, as much as I would love to have glorious, beautiful Canadian heavies lining the border of Belgium, standing side by side with South African heavies. I had to resist to make the game interesting for content, you know, the greater good. So that dream of mine died. And I guess, yeah, the Spanish Civil War happened. The thing in China happened with Siam and Manchukuo helping invade. Us allies, however, were too busy doing appeasement RP and pretending to be surprised whenever Germany did anything to really, actually plan or coordinate anything most of the time, but you know. Unfortunately, as the leader of the Allies, I had a duty to defend the free world. So I got to India to help clean up Ethiopia, began making a garrison there in preparation for the war. Australia was to garrison the ports in Egypt. Ireland would liberate Italian North Africa with help from South African heavies and the Canadian Air Force. I would make sure the UK wasn't sea-lined by the Axis miners and some meme Hail Mary to end the war early. And the Brazil player couldn't make it to the game, so they obviously weren't going to do anything, and the Mexico player wasn't allowed to join yet, so they couldn't do anything, so that was all for now. So as the war finally began, I helped invade Italian North Africa from the east, as the Irish came from the west, the Italians' worst nightmare, obviously. If Italy were a player, they wouldn't have actually joined the war, or at least called their North African puppet state into the war until Germany was finished up with France, so that this could be prevented. But this is just one of many exploits against the AI to come in this miners only game. It's the nature of things. I also had strategically moved my about 1,000 fighters to Poland to help contest the air there, because vanilla Germany relies heavily on air dominance when it's AI. A player can easily make tanks with SPAA and put a lot of AA in their divisions and can deal with it in other ways and can actually just be smart with air production too, but the AI relies heavily on having yellow air or being able to use casts, so deploying my fighters there at a point where Hungary, who was air controlling for the Axis, wasn't fully equipped just yet, was allowing us to delay things in Poland ever so slightly, and then delay things in the Benelux ever so slightly without ever breaking a rule of putting a division in France. There was a rule against putting air over France, so I couldn't actually contest air in France, but, you know, it never really came to that anyways. I guess I had planes stationed in France, but there was never a specific rule against that. So. And then, as the dust settled following this initial engagement, we had won on every single front. We took Ethiopia, we took North Africa, we delayed German advances in Europe, we protected the United Kingdom. Everything was a complete and astonishing success. I don't claim that that was challenging, we only did what was natural and what was easy, to be honest, but it was successful. And so we moved into phase 2 of the war, a much more interesting and complex phase, because once France capitulates, the main goal of the Allies is to gain some sort of foothold in Europe eventually. There was a Spanish player, so we could always count on invading there we could try to invade France. However, you can't forget about the entire theme of this game. The main issue with doing any of that is all the majors are AI, and the Allied AI was improved substantially so that it would actually try to reinvade Europe and do naval invasions, but at the same time, it's now programmed to flood any sort of naval invasion with as many divisions as they can possibly put in the ports, which causes massive supply problems and makes playing with AI almost impossible in multiplayer, you know, leading to the entire point of doing this in the first place. Because in most multiplayer games, there'll be options to either annex countries if people leave, or you'll just turn the AI off in general, because it's better to have a country that can't do anything than have a country that's going to flood all these naval invasions, make you go over the supply limit, and then you automatically will lose to any competent Axis miners who want to push you out of the port. So yeah, following this, we had been dealt a very interesting hand. We had won the air war pretty easily, even though that would only be so useful, considering that naval invading Europe would be nearly impossible. We won Africa, it was pretty much free, and in a very, very nice surprise, the entire Italian Navy got sunk like 6 months into the war in a couple engagements with the British Navy in the Mediterranean. So the Italian Navy was sitting at like 20 ships the entire time. So if the AI was even going to be smart enough to convoy escort the Allied miners over to Africa, they didn't even have that option. So in retrospect, it might have actually been better just to let them move a lot of stuff over to Africa and fight there, so then they were distracted and couldn't just destroy the Soviets. Because yeah, that was the largest concern. That was the one thing I was scared about most of the time, was the Soviet Union. There was Mongolia, but Mongolia can only do so much. Our entire hopes lied completely on Soviet AI, which I think is rather terrible. So yeah, for a while we were limited to a rather small course of action. We successfully invaded Sardinia and Sicily, but we were unable to push into Italy, primarily because of two things. First, just bad planning. In addition to the AI flooding our naval invasions with divisions, we also had extra people putting in divisions where they shouldn't be, and it was kind of a nightmare. And secondly, Bulgaria had formed the Third Bulgarian Empire and had got a lot of compliance on Yugoslavia and had actual good tanks that they were using, and it was just kind of impossible to do anything more than hold Sicily and a few tiles at the very bottom of the continent. So we were reduced to just fighting naval invasions in Norway. We did, however, help the Soviets out quite a bit by invading Finland through the very northernmost part of the border there where Finland and Norway meet. And then Norway was able to build a developed some air bases in northern Finland, from which I was able to strat bomb Finland with my 1,000 strat bombers and completely wipe out their civilian and military factories. I think at one point, 90% of both their civilian and military factories were damaged, so they were pretty much completely knocked out of the war, and there was really nothing they could do, I guess, besides beg for lend-lease. I don't know. And in Asia, India and Australia did a good job of holding their defensive positions. However, due to no fault of their own, they were forced to leave those, and the plan kind of collapsed there. I should have foreseen this, but the Japanese Navy was able to freely convoy raid all the divisions and all the supply going to Singapore and the other rubber islands, so we kind of had to retreat from all those because there was nothing we could do to hold them. There was no navy that any of us controlled that we could use to contest the entire AI Japanese Navy. Like, the US was probably off in the Mediterranean partying and celebrating the death of the Italian Navy years before they had even joined the war. So yeah, that was unfortunate. There was nothing we could do to hold those. Australia just had to retreat to defending Australia, and India had to desperately try to hold on as they also became independent from the UK and released Bangladesh and stuff, which only messed up the supply more. But yeah, us allies were able to accomplish a few interesting things. Like, we eventually capitulated Finland. I was able to strat bomb Bulgaria and kind of delete some of their factories, which was fun, but they were very, very powerful, and not just because of those tank bonuses I gave them. The AI also did a few good invasions, like they had pushed quite far into France at one point, but the problem is, we just didn't have any divisions to really support them with. The only player in all the allies, besides India, that had spare divisions was, like, Mexico. And Mexico had put a lot of their divisions in the Philippines to help the Philippines player survive. India had helped out a lot in Europe before they had their own problems they had to deal with. And once Singapore fell, I feel like that was just a domino effect, where India couldn't support us as much. Australia pretty much was doing nothing at that point. We were all kind of in a bad situation, and I had invested all of my industry into making planes, so it's not like I had any tanks or anything. And US and UK divisions, far over the supply limit, don't hold ports very well when threatened by Bulgarian tanks. I think that's the moral of the story. In the end, the Soviets didn't capitulate, but I conceded because it was going in that direction. But anyways, it was an interesting experiment to see how a multiplayer game would function with the majors on AI. It kind of just makes the game terrible, but it was interesting, and that was the point of it all. You know, for a terrible game, I wished for a terrible game, and I got a terrible cursed game, you know. That's just how things work, and so this was a win, even though I lost. Well, you know, it wasn't my fault. It was obviously rigged against me and way more difficult for me to win than the Axis. Of course, I'm definitely not just biased to my own point of view, but you know, in the end, it was fun. And I don't know, maybe I'll do more stuff like this in the future. I kind of had to do this weird thing where I just narrated the entire video because the audio, where it was still usable, it was just kind of, you know, there was this one guy in the voice chat that like was saying Among Us every 10 seconds. So like, I don't know, I could have like made a video using the actual audio from the game, but then there would be this one guy saying Among Us every 10 seconds in the audio, and like a lot of people went AFK too, so I don't know. It was interesting. It was a fun game though. Besides me being extremely stupid and deciding to be the air controller. Like, the air controller is the most boring thing in the entire